Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of Philosophy 100, Intro to Philosophy. This week, we're going to be discussing some issues in ethics and getting a little bit more abstract than we previously have been. So I'm going to start off this week with this lecture that gives a little bit more terminology, a little bit more, stuff to help us understand what it is that we're going to be talking about as we go forward over the next 2 weeks before we move on from ethics. Here's a good little meme that Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you don't know, is a scientist, a pretty good one, but he's a little bit confused about what the humanities do and the importance of philosophy sometimes. All right. So in ethics and philosophy in general, especially when we're doing ethics, we tend to talk about and try to define a number of terms. Most of them are, it's sometimes hard to define your terms. A lot of terms get defined sort of interdefined by appealing to the other one. And so when it comes to ethics, we have lots of, sort of ethicsy terms, right? The terms that you would use when you were talking about issues in ethics are things like talking about right and wrong, good and bad, what you should, must, or ought to do, what's permissible versus what's obligatory. That is like what is okay to do versus what is it that you have to do, and the rights that you might have, the duties that you might have, and finally the sort of over-encompassing notion of a norm, which I'll get to in a little bit. So today we're just gonna, at least here, I'm just gonna start by talking about these different notions. So people can be good or bad, right? Of course, there are people that are good and people that are bad, but what is it in virtue of? Like, what is it that makes a person good or makes a person bad? Is it their clothing, their bloodline, their heritage, their upbringing? No, it's not any of these things, right? That these aren't the things that make a person good or bad. It's their actions. It's how they act. It's what they do, right? A person that's good or bad. People could have exactly the same upbringing, exactly the same bloodline or heritage, and wear exactly the same things. And the different, if they're acting differently, then one could be good and the other could be bad. So it's their actions that make a person good or make a person bad. Generally, we judge a person's goodness or badness on the basis of the actions that they undertake. But that then leads us to, okay, so if a person, is good or bad because of their actions, then really in ethics, what we want to know about is what is it that makes an action good or makes an action bad? But even this question, like asking what actions are good and what actions are bad, is itself a little bit too general, because we need to ask, well, good or bad in what respect? So actions can be good or bad for something or for someone. So, for example, eating a salad is good for you. Smoking cigarettes is bad for you. But are either of these sort of examples normally understood as morally good or bad actions? I mean, is eating a salad morally good for you, or is smoking morally bad for you? No. There's some like moral implications that might be related to the goodness of eating a salad or the badness of smoking. But generally, these types of goodness and badness are understood with respect to one's health. And that's not a morally loaded issue, right? Smoking is bad for your health. Eating salads are good for your health. Doing things that are unhealthy can be, it can have a moral implication, but generally we think of unhealthy things as being bad for your health. There are plenty of things that are unhealthy, but that aren't immoral, like, eating too much cake or eating fast food. So sometimes eating fast food has, ethical implications, but, let's talk about eating French fries, right? Hopefully we can all agree eating French fries can be, or too many French fries especially, can be unhealthy, but it's acceptable from some moral standpoint, right? It doesn't tick the moral problematic box, right? Suppose, assume that you're eating some French fries where the potatoes weren't stolen, the fryer oil wasn't somehow the product of deforestation or slave labor, etc. The point is that there are different kinds of goodness and badness, right? There's goodness with respect to health, but there's also goodness with respect to the law, like whether or not you're a good citizen, whether or not you're doing right when you're following the rules. Goodness with respect to your job, like, are you doing a good job? Are you good at school? Are you good so far in this class? Goodness with respect to the economy. Is the economy doing well? Is it doing poorly? What are the jobs numbers? Goodness with respect to someone's desires, right? So if someone wants something, you can do better or worse with respect to satisfying that thing that they want. Goodness with respect to your grades. Are your grades good? Are your grades bad? It's possible for something to be good in one sense while still being bad also in another sense. So this is it gets a little bit complicated, but is there some ultimate sense of goodness and badness? Something like an all things considered goodness or badness? This is generally what we try to mean by moral goodness, right? We try to mean when someone says something is really good, they usually try to mean that it's morally good. An action is morally good when that action is the morally right thing to do. And actions can be the right thing to do with respect to other kinds of goods, but actions that are the morally right thing to do, if they are all things considered morally good actions. An action is morally wrong if morally speaking they are bad. Figuring out what makes an action morally right or morally wrong is a lot of what we're going to be discussing in this sort of section of the class. Whoops, sorry. All right, moving on. Norms. Normativity is basically what it is that we're studying when we're studying axiology. If you remember, axiology is the study of value. Norms are best expressed by using what we might think of as normative terminology. Normative terms are generally those terms that you use to prescribe or advise a certain course of action. So, for example, one should eat salad if one wants to be healthy. LeBron James ought to be less of a ball hog. Border agents must treat asylum seekers with respect. Each of these are examples of the normative use of each of these terms. They express something that it would be good for one to do or that one must do given some standard of correct action. Once again, normative terms such as these can be used with their moral sense in mind or other normative senses, for example, in the pursuit of health, lawfulness, success, etc. Some other examples. Human rights. So, right, humans have rights, we think, the right to remain silent, property rights. Duties, we got patriotic duties, fiduciary duties, civic duties. Obligations, we have things like parental obligations and legal obligations. And then the term permissible, right? We've got permissible actions or being permitted to enter or exit. All of these terms are interrelated, and so it's worth getting clear on how. Usually, if one has a particular right to something, then it is someone or everyone's duty to respect that right. So if one person has a right, say, to not being punched in the face, then it is everyone else's duty to not punch that person in the face. When one has a duty, one has an obligation to whomever has the reciprocal right, right? So if you have a duty towards someone, then you are obliged to, follow that duty towards the person who's got the right against you. When one is permitted to do some action X, one has the right to not be hindered, right? Stopped from doing X. Others have the obligation to not hinder you from exercising your right to X, right? Insofar as you're permitted to X. Actions that are obligatory are impermissible to not do. So things that are possibly like examples, taking care of your children. It is obligatory if you have a child and you haven't like given it up for adoption or, you know, rescinded your own obligation to the child. It is obligatory for you to take care of the child, meaning it is impermissible to not take care of the child. It is obligatory for you to be sober while operating a vehicle. This is not necessarily a moral sense of obligation, but it's a legal sense of obligation. Actions that are permissible, so the obligatory and permissible are interrelated, right? Actions that are permissible are not obligatory to not do, right? So something that's obligatory is something that you have to do. Something that's permissible is something that you can do. So anything that's permissible is something that it's not obligatory for you to not do. Things like going to the beach, right? At least not during the pandemic sometimes, or at least, you know, you can always go to the beach just to do active activities, non-passive activities, right? Things that, so it's permissible for you to go to the beach. It is not obligatory that you don't go to the beach, or expressing your distaste for the current president, right? It is permissible for you to do that, especially in this country, which means that it's not the case that you can't not do it. All right, here's another big distinction, the normative and the descriptive. In all discourse, especially argumentation, philosophy, there's a distinction that needs to be drawn between a normative claim and a descriptive claim. Generally, normative claims involve normative terms. And so if there's a normative term that is in part of the claim, then you can sort of be alerted. Oh, hey, this is a normative claim. They say, normative claims, how things should be or how things ought to be. Descriptive claims, on the other hand, describe how things are, will, or were. Like will be or were, right? They don't say how something should be. They say just, well, this is just how it is. They lack, descriptive claims, lack normative import. They don't tell you, they don't prescribe or, you know, lay claim to how something should be or say that something should be different. Some confusion can arise under this distinction. It's possible to describe something as good or bad, but as good and bad, the words, are both evaluative terms. Saying that something is good or bad is usually still considered to be making a normative claim. So here, this is why the distinction is important, the naturalistic fallacy. We want to avoid the naturalistic fallacy. Except in the case of describing things as good or bad. You can't derive an ought from an is. This is a famous phrase that you can't derive an ought from an is. That is, you can't come to a normative conclusion in some kind of argument on the basis of a merely descriptive claim. Take an example. Stabbing someone causes them pain. Therefore, stabbing someone is bad or morally wrong. That's an example of the naturalistic fallacy. Why? Well, there's something missing. Premise one is a descriptive claim. It says stabbings cause pain. But you can't derive a normative truth from a purely descriptive claim like premise one. You need something else, the thing that's missing. What is missing? A connecting normative premise. The missing premise in this case is that causing someone pain is bad, right? Or is something that you ought not to do. Missing premises like these are called implicit premises, and arguments that have missing premises are called enthymemes. You don't really need to know that, but it's a good piece of trivia. Here's an enthymeme example that really blatantly, obviously commits the naturalistic fallacy. Suppose, premise one, homosexuality is unnatural. Conclusion, therefore homosexuality is wrong. What's wrong with this argument? What's the missing premise? of course, it's this, right? That activities that are unnatural are somehow immoral. Therefore, homosexuality is immoral. This is a bad argument. At the very least, it's valid, meaning that the conclusion follows from the premises. But the issue here is that probably one of the both of the premises are probably false. Right. It's very unclear that homosexuality is an unnatural phenomenon. It happens in nature a lot. And it's very controversial to say that just because something is unnatural, that it is immoral. I mean, is building skyscrapers unnatural? Yes. Is building skyscrapers immoral? I don't know. That doesn't seem like a kind of moral issue. I don't know. All right. Two further distinctions concerning value. We've got the objective versus the subjective, and we have the intrinsic versus the extrinsic. These are both important to get in mind and to remember. First, objective versus subjective value. Some things are valuable because they are subject to evaluation. That is, they're the objects that are out there that we judge valuable or unvaluable. For example, ice cream. Ice cream is good, but its goodness is a feature of our desires. Ice cream is good because it is subject to our evaluation. We evaluate it well, we say that it is good, and so it is good. We value ice cream because of its value to us. Other things have value, arguably, apart from human desires. Things like knowledge, maybe power, love, family, human life, humanity itself. These things are objectively valuable. They are valuable as objects regardless of anyone's valuing them. Subjective value, then, is something that is valuable insofar as it is subject to evaluation. It's something that has value because someone values it. Objective value, on the other hand, is something that is valuable apart from any evaluative standpoint. It is something that is valuable because it has value, not because someone values it. All right, that brings us to the next distinction, the intrinsic versus the extrinsic distinction with respect to value. Extrinsic value is value that something has on the basis of something else. Its value is external or extrinsic to its nature. That is what it is, right? Its nature is what it is. For example, the most obvious example, money. Money has extrinsic value. Money is internally and intrinsically just bits of metal and paper, right? I mean, nowadays it's ones and zeros on some bank computer. But then there's still the coins and the bills. Intrinsic value, on the other hand, is something that has value in virtue of being the kind of thing that it is. This kind of value is had by things that are valuable in and of themselves. So, for example, human life is intrinsically valuable, plausibly, right? It's something that is valuable for its own sake. It's not valuable just because someone values it. So an intrinsic value is something that is valuable in itself, while an extrinsic value is something that is valuable because of some external condition. A subjective value is something that is valuable because someone has an evaluative attitude towards it. And an objective value is something that is valuable regardless of any evaluation. Now, all four of these are important and they are interconnected. And so it's worth getting clear a little bit on what the difference is between them. Generally, intrinsic values and objective values go hand in hand, as do subjective values and extrinsic values. The idea here, at the very least, is something like this. If something is intrinsically valuable, like a human life, then it is objectively valuable. It is in virtue of the fact that it is just intrinsically valuable. It's valuable because of the kind of thing that it is, that it has objective value. It is valuable apart from anyone's subjective point of view. Subjectively valuable things often, however, have extrinsic value. That is, things that are valuable because someone wants them or desires them are subjectively valuable. And then the thing's value is extrinsic to it because someone wants or values it, right? So money is a good example here. It's extrinsically valuable because it's only valuable because we sort of treat it as such. It's valuable for the things that it does, right? Money is not valuable in and of itself. It's valuable because it allows us to get things. And that also is sort of related to its subjective value. People want money because they know that it will allow them to get things, and so they value it. It is subjectively valuable and extrinsically valuable. It's not objectively valuable, right? It's a piece of money, a piece of paper, a piece of metal. That doesn't have real objective value. It has to be treated as valuable in the first place. And it doesn't have money doesn't have intrinsic value because for the same reasons, right? It's not something that's simply valuable in and of itself. All right. Next thing to get clear on is morality in the law. There's a common confusion in moral argumentation that is to claim that something is morally right or wrong simply because it is legal or illegal. This is a mistake. There are, of course, some cases in which laws have been enacted in order to enforce moral principles. For example, murder is illegal. It is also immoral. As a society, we have made murder illegal, partly because it is immoral. But not all laws govern moral matters, and many moral matters are left alone by the law. For example, driving on the left-hand side of the road. Is it illegal? Yeah. Is it immoral? Very unlikely. There's nothing wrong with driving on the left-hand side of the road, except that maybe, you cause accidents and things. But just if you were on an empty street and you drove on the left-hand side of the road, you wouldn't be doing anything, morally speaking, wrong. On the other hand, imagine you yell obscenities at a random stranger on the street, or just act in an asshole-ish way generally. Is that something that is illegal? No, almost certainly not. I mean, as long as you're not committing some kind of hate crime. Is it immoral? Yes, of course. Being an asshole is something that you should not do. You should not try to be an asshole. Morality and the law come apart. There are cases in which we legislate morality and cases in which it is not feasible or practical to do so. So, for example, it would be really difficult to try and legislate a moral code that says, you're not allowed to be mean to one another. However, and similarly, this is kind of where the case of abortion comes down that we were talking about last time. It's really difficult whether or not abortion is actually morally permissible or impermissible. It's going to be really difficult to construct a law that makes it illegal. One way or another. It may just be unfeasible to try and make it illegal because of certain kinds of issues with whether or not doctors can perform it, or whether or not women have health issues or things like that. That's just a sort of example. All right, so this brings us to the end of this sort of discussion of just the terminology. That gets us sort of often going into discussing ethics, and then we're going to start talking in the next lecture about metaethics and both. Well, first we're going to talk about James Rachel's The Problem of Cultural Relativism, and then divine command theory.